Toyota's Prius remains the most recognisable hybrid vehicle on our roads, but it's very different in this fourth generation guise. There's a sleeker, more striking shape, made possible by a stiffer, more sophisticated platform that helps to substantially improve the handling. The hybrid powertrain's cleverer too, hence a set of efficiency returns that once more establish this car's superiority over comparably priced diesel rivals. In short, this car's been thoroughly rejuvenated.
Welcome to the car that in its first 2 decades of life reshaped the global automotive landscape, bringing hybrid technology into the mainstream market while focusing the motor industry's attention on the way that its products could be cleaner, more efficient. Toyota's Prius did all that, and in this rejuvenated Mark IV model guise aims to continue to set those standards, building upon, well, quite a heritage of ingenuity. Now, to understand it, we need to turn the clock back to 1994, and the year in which the Toyota Motor Corporation made a decision aimed at fundamentally changing the way that the world would drive. Engines, until that point exclusively fuel-based, could, the company decided, be developed in future to run with a combination of fuel and battery power. This so-called hybrid solution would double efficiency, slash harmful emissions, and create a whole new class of car. So was born the Prius, the world's very first mass-produced hybrid-powered vehicle, a model true to the Latin roots of its name in being very much ahead of its time. So familiar are we with hybrids today that it's easy to forget just how groundbreaking this technology was 2 decades ago. It certainly took Toyota a while to get it right. Early prototypes catching fire, failing to start, or merely silently expiring after just a few miles of use. But Chief Engineer Takeshi Ukiyamada and his G21 development team persevered. And by early 1997, the very first Prius model was ready for launch. A dumpy, rather awkward-looking saloon that suited the Japanese market, but rather puzzled everyone else. Toyota lost money on every one sold, but they weren't put off. The world would have a hybrid. It was simply a matter of time. And public perception, which began to change when movie stars like Leonardo DiCaprio, Cameron Diaz and Harrison Ford all became Prius people. Drive this car and it was clear to all that you cared about your world and its future, a statement that, as it turned out, a lot of people wanted to make. So many, in fact, that suddenly what had begun as something GM's vice chairman described as an interesting curiosity became a must-have eco-fashion accessory, especially when a larger, more stylish second-generation hatchback version was introduced in 2003 with significant gains in power and efficiency. You look smart, you should drive a Prius, the advertising told us, and very soon millions were doing just that. The model's mass-market success sealed with the launch of a third-generation version in 2009 that used a more efficient hybrid system and switched from 1.5 to pokier 1.8-litre petrol power, yet was still cleaner and more frugal. By now, Toyota was ready to roll out hybrid technology across all its mainstream products and share it with its Lexus luxury brand. As a result, by the end of 2015, the corporation had sold over 8 million hybrids. 3.5 million of them Prius models. A success story then? Well, to a point. For all its notoriety, the Prius remained a niche market choice in its first 3 generations of life. A great option if you wanted to demonstrate your concern for the polar ice cap, but too compromised in handling and practicality to interest most mainstream family hatch folk. The suspension lurched through the corners, the CVT auto you had to have was thrashy, and the batteries took up boot space. What kind of car would this Toyota be, though, if these things were sorted and the Prius brought up to date with a younger, more dynamic image, we wondered? Could it be made efficient enough to outclass a fresh generation of eco-minded diesel rivals? And would Toyota match its environmental credentials with an equally impressive showing in the fields of safety and connectivity? Here then are the questions we need to pose in testing this Mark IV model, launched in the early spring of 2016. Toyota says this car will be rewarding to drive. Surely not. I mean, it's a Prius after all. That sort of thing simply isn't in this car's DNA. Or at least, to date, it hasn't been. With this Mark IV version though, the young design team wanted this model not only to look sportier, but also to feel more engaging at the wheel. In a previous Prius, you felt like you were using some kind of very effective domestic appliance. In this one though, much more than that is being promised, thanks to fundamental chassis, suspension and steering changes. To start with though, the whole experience is very much as before and will retain a futuristic feel for the customers new to the hybrid concept that Toyota is trying to attract. Push the round start button and flick the stubby little blue CVT gear lever into D. Hybrid's nearly always automatic, and there is silence. Now your first reaction is to push the button again, but no, this is how it is, and how it will be for much more of your journey this time around. Now we'll get to that in a minute, but for the time being, there's a rather pleasant sensation of eco-conscious refinement as you waft away from rest. It doesn't last very long once on the move. Toyota's full hybrid system always tries to revert to all-electric mode, but from start off, it isn't very long before the engine cuts in, even if you've got a feather-light right foot. In theory, you can mandate all-electric motoring by pressing this EV button on the dash, but that only works for just over a mile, and it won't function at all if the engine's cold or if for some reason the batteries aren't charged up. Plus, staying battery powered requires such a relaxed pace, under 31 miles per hour, that you'll quickly find other irritated road users queuing up behind you. At least the spoiler bisecting the rear window means that you won't be able to see them very well. If all those drawbacks really bother you and you'd like to be able to travel further and faster with silent milk float all-electric mobility, then you'll be target market for the pricier Prius plug-in model that your dealer can tell you about. As before, the hybrid Synergy drive system operates in two ways once your all-electric range is spent. Give it full throttle and you'll be using only the engine, but if you're going to drive like that most of the time, then there's not much point in buying this kind of car in the first place. Ease back, trying to stay in the central blue band of the provided HV system indicator's eco driving gauge, and you'll be operating in the hybrid setup's comfort zone, where engine and battery power cut in and out with seamless synchronicity. As part of this, during deceleration and under braking, the engine switches off and both electric motors act as high output generators, recovering kinetic energy that automatically recharges the batteries for the next time the hybrid system is able to switch back into electric only mode. You can increase the effectiveness of the regeneration process by flicking the gear lever from D into this B setting. Mastering this kind of thing is important because unless this car's Panasonic battery cells are regularly replenished with energy, the main electric motor isn't going to be actively intervening very often to relieve the engine. Fortunately though, that process has been refined quite a lot with this fourth generation model, backing up Toyota's claim that a much greater proportion of your driving will be all electrically powered this time around, up to 50% of it in fact, if you're travelling in urban conditions. Thanks to hybrid system changes, a more effective battery and a clever heat recovery setup that uses spent exhaust gases to speed up the warming of engine coolant, the Japanese maker reckons a Mark IV Prius driver will find the electric motor cutting in to save fuel around about 60% more frequently than it did in the previous model. It's difficult for us to accurately verify that, but subjectively there does appear to be less engine interference than before, which in turn makes this Prius an even quieter, more refined mode of transport than it already was. In other words, this car works as a clean, frugal automotive tool, and better than it ever did before. We're more interested to know though whether it can do all of that and at the same time provide Prius people with something new, the element of driving enjoyment that I alluded to at the beginning. Previously, this car wouldn't have been able to offer that without stiffer suspension settings that would have alienated its typically comfort-orientated customers. Now though, better handling has been achieved thanks to a more fundamental change that should keep everyone happy: the installation of this Mark IV model's all-new TNGA, Toyota New Global Architecture platform. This makes the car a massive 60% stiffer than it was before, while also positioning it closer to the tarmac and lowering the centre of gravity. These two things really ought to reduce body roll and encourage more precise and responsive handling. And as soon as you point the car at a few corners, it's clear that they do. In the previous model, you wouldn't have been able to enjoy these improvements very much because of the lifeless steering and also the suspension that, turning under power, would have had the car jumping about all over the place on anything other than a billiard table smooth surface. Realising this, the development team have completed a thorough redesign of both elements, hence the greater feel and feedback of the new electric steering system and the completely fresh double wishbone rear suspension setup that's nearly 50% better at soaking up impacts from our country's terrible tarmac. Don't misunderstand us, this Prius has by no means been turned into any kind of sporting family car, and it never should be. What we're saying is that you can now switch to one and, with modest expectations, still enjoy your driving. And that is a big change from what was on offer before. The way you're now positioned at the smaller rimmed wheel certainly helps in this regard. The placement lower, the angle more engaging. The power delivery dynamics have changed too. Previously, the most frustrating thing about driving a Prius was the thrashiness of its belt-driven CVT automatic gearbox. You press the throttle, the revs roared painfully, and not much happened. It was the car's way of admonishing such an environmentally unfriendly driving style. This fourth generation version still doesn't much like driving in that way. In fact, a vast array of electronic readouts are on hand to actively discourage it. But if you really must push on, then the car is now a little more willing to oblige. And that's thanks to a CVT setup which is a touch more responsive and doesn't ask the engine to rev as much as before. Ah, yes, the engine. Now, we're coming to that. On paper, it's the same 1.8 litre VVTi Atkinson cycle unit that this car had previously. In practice, though, it's very different this time around, not least because in pursuit of efficiency, it developed slightly less power and torque, hence a total hybrid system output that's fallen from 134 brake horsepower in the Mark III model to 122 brake horsepower here. Toyota says that weight savings and tweaks to the hybrid system compensate for that. And sure enough, the basic performance stats rest to 62 miles an hour in 10.6 seconds and a maximum speed of 112 miles an hour are very little different to what went before. In fact, the powertrain's even flexible enough this time around to make Toyota confident enough to allow Prius owners to tow for the first time, provided the trailer in question doesn't exceed 725 kilograms in weight. Flexible it might be, but as with most hybrids, this powertrain doesn't actually feel anything like as fast as those performance stats suggest. The figures I've given you imply that a Prius will match the performance of a comparably priced rival 1.5 or 1.6 litre diesel, but of course that doesn't take into account the fact that a typical black pump fuel competitor will have nearly twice as much torque to propel you through the gears. All of this means that you'll only be able to keep up with such cars by driving in a very un-Prius-like fashion and making use of the most dynamic of the three provided driving modes that you access via this dashboard button. Switch out of either the grey-tinged normal or blue-tinged eco settings and select power, and red mist descends onto the graphics. It doesn't pay at this point, however, to get too excited, but you would experience sharper throttle response and an adjustment in engine braking performance to make the car feel just a little more alert. Which brings me back to where I started. This Prius is exactly that, a little more alert. Its character isn't fundamentally changed, but it is fundamentally different. Perhaps that's exactly as it should be. The appearance of a Prius must not only be instantly recognisable, but also aggressively futuristic. That is, after all, the whole point of it. I mean, were you to want this technology packaged more conventionally, then you'd be looking at one of Toyota's more ordinary models, a Yaris, an Auris, or a RAV4. Here, in contrast, is the poster child of the eco-revolution, complete with its familiar styling cues, the trademark arching roofline, the slab sides and the double rear screen. Yet somehow this time round it's different. The concept behind this car reinvented for the modern era by a team of young Japanese designers who set out to make it look more powerful, more engaging and sporty. The overall effect is certainly striking, even if it isn't necessarily very beautiful, with a slanted waistline and a jagged front end that certainly makes much more of a statement this time around. And it's at the front where we'll start, where a much lower bonnet line is emphasised by a brand emblem badge that sits no higher up than it would do on the company's sleek GT86 sports car. The switch to all LED headlights has made the lamps slimmer and more stylised, as are the equally angular fog lamps that flank a lower grille that's designed for optimal aerodynamic efficiency. The lower, more athletic theme continues at the side, where the completely new TNGA Toyota New Global Architecture platform has enabled 20mm to be shaved from the total height in pursuit of what the brand hopes is a more youthful, dynamic look. There's plenty else to emphasise that point too, notably this prominent central belt line. Further back, this lies beneath a sharp upper crease that fans out from the rear door into the tail lamps. The flanks now have more shape too, thanks to this gently rising lower front door crease, and below that, the light-catching surface of this rocker panel that flows along the side before racing upwards towards the rear wheel arch. At the rear, well, the aesthetics are even more extrovert, with that low roof distinctively integrated into the rear pillars using blacked out panels shaped to draw air round the side windows to the back of the car. Here, the split rear screen creates a natural rear spoiler that flows into striking boomerang-shaped LED tail lamps featuring aero-stabilising fins. Of course, as usual, what's more important is the stuff you can't see, notably the way that the new TNGA platform creates a body that's not only lighter, but also a massive 60% stiffer than before. Even the wheels are less weighty and more rigid, with these larger 17-inch rims featuring smart resin ornamentation. Time to move inside and investigate a cabin that committed Prius people will find much the same, yet very different. As before, there are no dials to view through the three-spoke steering wheel. Instead, the instrument cluster retains its position top and centre on the dash, in this case made up of a couple of 4.2-inch TFT colour screens. The main display, closest to you, incorporates a digital speed readout and also shows the colour for the driving mode that you've selected, blue for eco, grey for normal and red for power. To the left of that is a further multi-information display that gives you information about the hybrid system and eco driving guidance, along with multimedia info, climate control settings, a compass and driving assistance alerts. Anything this can't tell you will probably be dealt with by the Toyota Touch 2 media screen that sits a little further down on the centre stack just below these neatly branded air vents. With all variants, the monitor is 7 inches in size and incorporates the usual audio, informational and Bluetooth phone functions, along with a useful rear view camera. Now, if you add navigation to this setup, you also get onboard connectivity via Toyota Online. Now, this will give you access to features like Google Street View, Google Local Search, the TomTom traffic service, IP Traffic, the Panoramio photo sharing service, and an apps function. Buyers who want to go further can specify this system in upgraded Plus guise, where it builds in voice command recognition and a text-to-speak message readout function. Plus, it also has the capacity to display SMS texts, emails and calendars via compatible smartphones. There's also Wi-Fi connectivity. Enough with the various screens. What about the design? Well, the lower bonnet and the deeper windscreen mean that forward visibility is certainly better than in the past. Unfortunately though, the split rear screen still compromises your view out back, so that standard rear view camera is a very welcome feature. Otherwise, as usual with a Prius, it all feels very different, with the layered dashboard as ever prioritising distinct control and display zones. This time around, the fascia, which is also offered in grey if you don't like this black finish, wraps gently round the driver before flowing almost seamlessly into these door panels. Now that is quite subtle, but the more overt clash of colours isn't. This silver-framed, glossy piano black centre panel contrasting sharply with the bright white plastic mouldings lower down. We are more comfortable with the seats, and you will be too. They've been very effectively redesigned for greater support, and they're also positioned 55mm lower and at a better angle to the steering wheel for a more natural and engaging driving position. The curious stubby blue auto gear lever falls neatly to hand too. Its light frictionless action rather at odds with the effort required to operate the ratcheting foot-pumped parking brake. Stuff we like includes the head-up display and this neat wireless phone charger, both standard on plusher models, the latter feature to be found here at the base of the centre stack. Plus, we're impressed by the air conditioning system with its clever S-Flow functionality, and this tailors interior climate control to suit the number of people in the car. As for things we'd change, well, the heated seat buttons are really quite hidden. This piano black centre panel attracts hairs and smears, and these white lower sections, while scratch resistant, well, we think mark up quite quickly. We also think the door bins are too small, although in compensation there is a deep storage box between the seats behind a twin cup holder area that also includes USB, 12 volt and aux in points. There's also a reasonably sized glove box and overhead space for your sunglasses. Time to move rearwards and take a seat in the back. A process that, unless you're really quite short, will involve the need to duck below this sloping roofline. Having done that, you might not be too surprised to find that once inside, headroom is at something of a premium for taller folk. Normally these seats would have been positioned a little lower to compensate for this swept-back ceiling, but that's not possible here since they sit right on top of the hybrid system's bulky battery pack. Otherwise though, there really isn't very much to grouse about. Legroom here is generous, and thanks to the low central transmission tunnel, it's much easier to seat 3 people here than would normally be the case in this size of car. Useful practicalities include provision of a 12-volt socket, good-sized bottle holders in the doors, and sizable cup holders in this redesigned central armrest. Finally, let's take a look out back. Now, with previous Prius models, the batteries took up cargo room. No longer. They've been redesigned here to be more compact, and this, along with the Mark IV version's revised rear suspension and more compact hybrid system, means that boot space has risen by 56 litres to a 502 litre total, 343 litres of which is below the window line. Or at least that's what I've got in this case, courtesy of the fact that this plusher model rides on 17-inch wheels. Now, with these bigger rims, Toyota, for some reason, declines to supply the temporary spare wheel that normally resides beneath the boot floor on models that roll on 15-inch alloys. So you're stuck with this fiddly tyre repair kit. With the spare in place under here, you'd have 457 litres, which is still way more than you get in a Golf or an Astra, and a space that's more than 30% bigger than that provided by a Ford Focus. That being the case, it seems churlish to complain about the shallowness of the loading bay, or the fact that it doesn't include a 12-volt socket or a ski hatch for longer items. You do get these neat fold-out bag hooks though, which are apparently tested with typical Toyota thoroughness to ensure that they won't buckle beneath the weight of even the bulkiest takeaway. To accommodate larger items, you push forward this 60/40 split folding rear backrest, at which point up to 1,054 litres of space is revealed up to the height of the load cover, or 1,633 litres if you stack your stuff all the way up to the roof. Prius pricing starts from just under £24,000 and ranges up to just over £27,000 for a package that's mechanically identical across the range. A 5-door body style powered by a 1.8-litre VVTi petrol-electric hybrid engine that has to be mated to a CVT automatic gearbox. Toyota also offers a Prius Plus 7-seat MPV that uses much of the same technology, and a pricier Prius plug-in version of this standard body style, a variant featuring batteries able to be charged up from a main supply to considerably increase your all-electric driving range. For that, though, you need to think in terms of spending just over £30,000, which is beyond the budget of most typical buyers. So we'll focus on the conventional version here and point out the reality that in terms of competition for this variant, the closest rivals probably come from within the Toyota family. The brand offers a hybrid version of its conventional Auris family hatch, while Lexus uses the same power plant in its CT200H entry model. Both cars are of a similar size to this Prius, and the Auris could save you nearly £3,500, while more surprisingly, the Lexus could be up to a couple of £1,000s cheaper too. In each case, though, motive power is provided by the previous generation Prius model's hybrid engine, a unit about 15% less efficient than this one. Plus, if it matters, with an Auris or a CT200H, you get significantly less boot space. Are there other conventional hybrid options you could consider? Well, not many directly comparable ones. Hyundai's Ioniq hybrid is probably the closest alternative from another brand, but it's not quite as clean as a Prius. Or there's Kia's Nero hybrid, but that's a compact crossover model aimed at a slightly different audience, and it's unlikely to be considered by many potential Prius people. Ford offers a hybrid version of its Mondeo, which is priced comparably with top-spec Prius models, but that's based on older technology and it's nothing like as clean and frugal as this Toyota. What else? Well, there are various plug-in hybrid models, of course. Volkswagen's Golf GTE, Audi's A3 e-tron, Mitsubishi's Outlander PHEV and Kia's Optima plug-in, for example. All of these cars, though, are well over £30,000, even after deduction of the government's plug-in grant towards purchase, which puts them out of reach of many typical Prius buyers. The same applies to the range extender version of BMW's i3, which mates all-electric power with a small bike engine that cuts in to give you extra range when it's necessary. Full all-electric mobility with no range extender style engine safety net is affordable within a typical Prius budget. Not really from the battery-only version of that BMW i3, which costs around £28,000, but certainly from all-electric models like Nissan's Leaf and the Volkswagen e-Golf. With these, though, you will of course have restrictions of operating range that most customers of this Toyota simply won't want to be bothered with. What all this means is that potential Prius buyers looking at alternatives probably won't be looking at other hybrid or electric models. Instead, they're more likely to be considering this car against a comparably sized diesel engine family hatch. So let's do just that. Now, you can't make a credible comparison with eco-branded versions of cars like that. Volkswagen's Golf Blue Motion, Ford's Focus Econetic and so on, because they can't be ordered with the auto gearbox that you have to have with this Prius. Which means that the closest comparison we can make here is with a 1.5 or 1.6 litre diesel automatic. Now, you can have such a thing for around £20,000 if you go for a Ford Focus or a Vauxhall Astra, or around £23,000 if you go for a Volkswagen Golf. But the car in question would give you around 25 fewer miles from every gallon of more expensive black pump fuel, and it would chug out 35 to 45 grams per kilometre more CO2, polluting the atmosphere and pushing up your benefit-in-kind tax bill. In other words, this would be a different world in terms of running cost efficiency. If, having considered all of that, you conclude that it is a Prius that you really want, then you're going to need to know just how generous Toyota has been with the standard spec this time around. So, let's see. Even on entry-level active variants, you get 15-inch alloy wheels, dusk-sensing LED headlights, LED daytime running lights and LED rear lamp clusters, also an alarm and a smart entry system and a proper temporary spare wheel rather than one of those silly tyre mobility kits. Inside, as well as that standard auto gearbox, every model gets the Toyota Touch 2 infotainment setup with its centre dash screen and a 6-speaker DAB audio system. Plus, there's also dual-zone automatic air conditioning that's clever enough to sense which seats are occupied and adjust its flow accordingly. In addition, all variants get a rear-view camera, which is just as well, given the way that the two-piece rear window cuts across your line of vision when you're reversing. Plus, there's Bluetooth phone connectivity, electric lumbar adjustment for the driver's seat, all-round electric windows and adaptive cruise control. And this is one of a whole range of electronic safety features that I'll cover in more detail in a minute. Most Prius buyers, though, will probably be tempted into finding the small extra premium necessary to trade up into one of the mid-range business edition variants. Now that gets you a colour head-up display, an auto-dimming rear-view mirror, heated front seats, leather steering wheel trim and a useful wireless phone charger. And with Business Edition Plus derivatives, Toyota will also add in larger 17-inch alloy wheels, a smart intelligent park assist system with front and rear parking sensors, and Toyota Touch 2 with Go satellite navigation and media connectivity. As for the plushest Excel trim level, well, here you get leather seats, rain-sensing wipers, a JBL premium audio setup and an upgraded Toyota Touch 2 with Go Plus infotainment system that allows you to create in the Prius a Wi-Fi hotspot. On to options. Now, there aren't too many. You can add things like parking sensors and the navigation system into lower grade models. And if you go for a plush version like this one, with 17-inch wheels that'll slightly harm your running costs, you can downsize them back to the 15 inches at no extra cost. Beyond that, you'll probably want to think about various extra cost metallic or pearlescent paint finishes, including the hypersonic red shade featured here. Now, this particular finish is created using a three-stage process that adds luster, allowing light to pass through a translucent red layer and reflect off incorporated flakes of aluminium. What else? Well, we'd want to consider the protection pack, which adds front and rear mud flaps, scuff plates, a rear bumper protection plate and a boot liner. And if you care about your car's aesthetics, then the black or chrome pack might be of interest. And this adds a rear diffuser, front fog lamps and side sill trims in piano black or bright chrome finish. A range of integrated rear seat entertainment options is available, including DVD players and single or twin iPad holders that can be clipped onto the back of the front seat head restraints to keep those kids quiet on longer trips. Finally, there is a range of tow bar options. This generation model is the first to be able to tow a trailer. Plus, there's a pack targeted at the taxi drivers who buy so many Prius models. Safety-wise, all models are very well provided for, with the Toyota Safety Sense package that costs extra on many of the brand's other models provided as standard on this one. Now with this, you get a whole series of advanced electronic safety features that could hardly have been imagined when the last generation Prius was launched. Perhaps the most significant of these is the forward collision warning with autonomous emergency braking system. And that's one of those that scans the road ahead as you drive, the system searching for potential collision hazards, with particular emphasis on pedestrians. Now, if such a hazard is detected, you'll be warned. And if you don't respond, or perhaps you aren't able to, the brakes will automatically be applied to decrease the severity of any resulting accident. Other standard safety sense electronic features include road sign assist. That's there to picture road signs as you pass and then display them for you on the dash. An automatic high beam setup that dips your headlights for you at night. A lane departure alert feature that warns dozy drivers when they're veering out of their lanes on the highway and will also help to correct the steering. And an adaptive cruise control system that keeps you a safe distance from the car ahead and also automatically regulates your cruising speed, slowing you down or speeding you up with the traffic flow. Now avoid entry-level trim and you also get two further features. A blind spot monitor, which warns you on the move if you're dangerously about to pull out to change lane or overtake. And a rear cross traffic alert system, which warns you of oncoming vehicles when you're reversing out of a parking space. More conventional safety features include ISOFIX child seat mountings, anti-whiplash head restraints and 7 airbags, including a driver's knee bag. Now, to try and make sure that you never have to use them, there's VSC, vehicle stability control, and an ABS braking system with brake assist for emergency stops. Plus, TRC, traction control, and hill start assist control to stop you from drifting backwards on uphill junctions. Prior to the launch of the fourth generation version of this Toyota, industry commentators were beginning to question the Prius's place in the whole scheme of modern day motoring. Yes, the Mark III variant had moved things on a long way, improving on the original design's cleanliness and frugality by nearly 25%. Even so though, as the 21st century moved into its second decade, its returns, emissions of 89 grams per kilometre and a combined cycle fuel economy reading of 72.4 miles per gallon were looking less and less ultimately impressive. By now, after all, there were lots of more affordable, frugal diesel family hatches that could at least equal this Toyota's CO2 reading, with many of them able to better its fuel showing by as much as 15%. Plus, buyers with more money to spend were being shown that plug-in hybrids and extended range electric vehicles could go beyond that and offer a completely new level of efficiency without resorting to the limitations of full electric mobility. As a result, rival brands were increasingly ignoring the conventional hybrid technology that Prius had pioneered. Was there still a place for it? We'll answer that question in the way that Toyota has with this Mark IV Prius, by giving you two stats: up to 94.1 miles per gallon on the combined cycle and 70 grams per kilometre of CO2, those being the headline figures for this latest version. If you then reference the fact that the original first generation model delivered only 55.4 miles per gallon on the combined cycle and 120 grams per kilometre of CO2, you'll have an accurate awareness of exactly how far this Japanese corporation's understanding of hybrid technology has progressed in just 2 decades. Bear in mind also that Toyota can offer plug-in hybrid technology too. In fact, arguably, the brand did much to invent it. Now, if you add that into this car, then more new benchmarks are set. A difficult to believe combined cycle figure of 202 miles per gallon and a CO2 return of just 32 grams per kilometre. That's courtesy of a larger 8.8 kilowatt hour battery pack that uses more advanced lithium ion cells and can be charged in only 2 hours 20 minutes to provide an all-electric driving range of up to 30 miles. Here though, our focus is on the conventional hybrid version, which certainly sets fresh standards when matched against direct diesel rivals, which have fallen way behind it in the efficiency stakes. Just how far behind? Well, think of the most frugal family hatch you can buy. Say a Volkswagen Golf Blue Motion 1.6 TDI or a Ford Focus 1.5T DCI E-Kinetic. Now both manage 83.1 miles per gallon on the combined cycle and around 89 grams per kilometre of CO2. So there's a significant deficit to start with, even before you begin to take into account the pricier diesel fuel. And that deficit would increase substantially if you conducted a proper like-for-like comparison and got yourself either of those cars in a form that would give you the automatic gearbox that comes included in the Prius package. So, how has Toyota managed such a seismic step forward this time around? We certainly didn't expect it, given that at first glance you might think the hybrid synergy drive system used here to be little different from one that powered the previous model, incorporating as it does much the same 1.8 litre VVTi Atkinson cycle engine. Now if that's your perspective, then take a second look, for the reality is that much has changed. The electric motors are smaller for a start, and the Panasonic battery has also been reduced in size. Now, although 10% more compact, it can absorb 28% more energy in the same amount of time. As a result, it's faster charging and therefore can cut in to relieve the petrol power plant more often. That's a process also aided by a clever heat recovery system that uses spent exhaust gases to speed up the warming of engine coolant. Now these two changes make a big difference. So big, in fact, that Toyota reckons a Mark IV Prius driver will find the electric motor cutting in to save fuel around 60% more frequently than it did in the previous model. When the engine is in use, it functions quite a lot more frugally than it did before, thanks to a complete redesign that's seen great improvements in combustion efficiency, along with innovative ways of managing heat and reducing friction. It also breathes better thanks to a new intake system and the addition of a large volume exhaust gas recirculation setup. Now, Toyota measures the results of all this development in terms of thermal efficiency, the extent to which the engine converts its energy available from its fuel into usable energy to power the vehicle. Judged in this way, the Prius power plant attains a 40% thermal efficiency rating, which is a world best figure for a petrol unit. The efficiency enhancements don't stop there either. This Mark IV model Prius is 20 kilograms lighter and far more slippery than its predecessor, with a 0.24 CD drag coefficient, aided by the way that the new TNGA platform channels air more smoothly beneath the car. There's also an electric shutter behind the large lower front grille that opens and closes in line with the cooling requirements of the engine. That not only aids aerodynamics, but also helps the vehicle more quickly reach operating temperature. Further gains have been made in improving the rolling resistance performance of the tyres and in the development of an intelligent S-Flow air conditioning system that senses who's in the car and then minimises airflow around any empty seats. It's all very clever. To get the full benefit though, you've got to do your part as a driver, and that means proactive use of the various modes and systems provided. Previous Prius people will be familiar with the fact that this car uses a full hybrid system, one that allows the electric motor to operate independently of the petrol engine. And thanks to this, the car will revert to an all-electric drive format as often as it can. And you can even force the car to operate that way by pressing this EV button. Now, the EV function is only available for just over a mile though, and it won't work at all if you exceed 30 miles per hour or if for some reason the batteries aren't charged up. If that bothers you and you'd like to be able to go further with silent milk float all-electric mobility, then you'll be target market for the pricier Prius plug-in model that I mentioned earlier. As I said, our focus here will remain on the conventional version, which offers a variety of tools for maximising every drop of petrol. Earlier I mentioned driving modes activated by this dashboard button. Now, to get anywhere near the quoted figures, you'll need to stay out of the normal and power settings and keep in eco mode. This enhances economy by optimizing power delivery, adjusting throttle response and tweaking the air conditioning performance. Those in a frugal frame of mind will also want to keep an eye on the various graphical screens provided by the fascia's large 7-inch Toyota Touch 2 colour monitor. There are two, one badged past record and the other trip information. The first shows your recent fuel consumption, while the other builds on that with information on your operating range and your average speed. It also shows the amount of braking energy your journeys have regenerated, and that's something you can optimize by keeping this stubby gear stick in its B setting rather than in the D mode that you would normally select. Another option on the screen is the useful energy monitor. That's there to show at a glance at any time what's charging or being driven by what. For all your other eco-driving tools, you'll need to shift your gaze up to the smaller, simpler screens that lie a little further up the dash. Possibly to the digital speedo, which gives an average fuel consumption reading for each of its two trip settings, but more likely to this simpler multi-information display that lies directly to the left of it. This provides another energy monitor, this time in simpler form, but the key option we'd initially point you to here is the HV system indicator with its useful battery level indicator and driving gauge. The gauge also features as a viewable option on the head-up display that projects key information onto the base of the windscreen if your Prius has been fitted with that feature. However you view it, the basic trick is to keep within the central eco section as you drive, while trying to avoid straying into the red power section at the top of the graph. View this eco driving gauge through the HV system indicator, and the display also includes a feature that on each trip will score the efficiency of your driving. Here, judgment is based around three key criteria: eco start and eco stop, rate your smoothness when starting off or coming to a halt, while eco cruise is based around the need for driving without sudden acceleration. Every time you power off, the system will deliver your overall score and offer advice as to how you could in future improve it. Now, if that's not quite enough to make you feel like you're back at school, then the other options available via the multi-information display probably will. First, there's an eco savings screen that allows you to enter in fuel prices and work out how much Prius motoring is saving you. Next up is a fuel consumption record that allows you to monitor your frugality frequently, maybe over the last mile or the last 5 minutes, or infrequently, say over the last month. Plus, there's even an eco diary that shows distance travelled and average fuel consumption, either over the last few days or over the last month. As you can see, over the last month, this car has been averaging no more than 50 to 60 miles per gallon, something rather off Toyota's quoted figures. But then, to be fair, this test car has been driven harder than it would be in ordinary ownership. When used sensibly, we've found that returns of just over 70 miles per gallon are perfectly possible. Overall, our take is that with this car, we've been getting between 5 to 10 miles per gallon more than we would have done with an eco-branded diesel rival. Bear in mind also, by the way, that the efficiency figures I gave you at the beginning do depend on your choosing a version with the smaller 15-inch wheels. The 17 inches on a plush derivative like this one lower the returns significantly to 85.6 miles per gallon on the combined cycle and 76 grams per kilometre of CO2. Either way though, this car is going to work out as a very efficient choice, especially for business users who are concerned about their benefit-in-kind taxation status. Now, we've crunched the numbers here and found that over 3 years, a 40% taxpayer running a Prius in base active trim would save £935 over the cost of running a comparable Ford Focus 1.5T DCi Econetic. That's a figure that will rise to £1,052 for a 45% taxpayer. The Focus Econetic, though, is a manual model, and this Prius, of course, only comes as an auto. If remembering that, we pitched this Toyota against a more comparable automatic diesel family hatch, the savings would be much greater. A Volkswagen Golf 1.6 TDI DSG, for example, would cost a 40% taxpayer a massive £2,757 more than a base spec Prius in benefit-in-kind taxation over 3 years. Or £3,102 if you were a 45% taxpayer. And these are hard figures to ignore. If you agree, then the clincher might come when you start to consider the savings the Prius will deliver when it comes to servicing costs, thanks to the low maintenance requirements built into the hybrid Synergy drive system. Now, as part of this, there's no starter motor or alternator to go wrong, no drive belts to break, a maintenance-free timing chain, no particulate filter to get clogged up with diesel fumes, and of course, thanks to that CVT auto gearbox, there's no clutch either. The hybrid setup has a good record for minimising tyre wear, and its battery will last the life of the car. Plus, the regenerative braking setup helps extend the life of those brake pads. Over 60,000 miles of driving, the front pads should only require replacing once, while the rear pads and all the desks will probably last the full distance. The various prepaid servicing packages you can buy will further help manage costs in this regard. There's a strong environmental argument to make too, given that the Prius emits nitrogen oxide emissions that are way down what you'd be smoking out if you're at the wheel of a diesel. And of course, during much of your urban motoring in this Toyota, say when you're inching along in traffic with the engine seamlessly disabled, the EV mode activated, and battery power in motion, you won't be releasing any emissions at all. In terms of other things worth knowing, you'll want to note that owners of conventional hybrid models like this one no longer qualify for free congestion charging, but you do get a decent 5-year, 100,000 mile warranty. Though that's not quite a match for Kia's 7-year deal, this is a notable improvement on the limiting 3-year, 60,000 mile packages that you get from brands like Ford, Vauxhall and Volkswagen. It's all just another reason why residual values for this car stack up so well. In fact, independent experts reckon that this Toyota will outperform even premium branded compact hatch diesel rivals. After 3 years, caps say that a Prius will be worth around 10% more than, say, an Audi A3 Sportback 1.6 TDI. What else? Are you worried about the complexity of the hybrid system? Well, don't be. There are over 8 million Toyota-engineered hybrids reliably pounding global roads, and the facts are that hybrid technology generates fewer warranty claims than conventional petrol or diesel engines do. Anyway, the hybrid system gets its own 5-year warranty, and users like taxi operators will be interested to hear that you can choose to further extend this every year in the first decade of ownership with no limits on total mileage. There's also a 12-year anti-corrosion and perforation warranty and a 3-year paintwork and surface rust warranty. Finally, I'll tell you that the insurance grouping for all models is rated at Group 14E. So, Toyota's Prius finally makes real-world sense. a car you can justify buying, even if you're not trying to make some kind of environmental statement. True, it isn't cheap, but it is decent value for what you get, especially if you compare against comparably specified high-efficiency diesel rivals, featuring engine technology that, well, by comparison, dates back to the Ark. Now, with enhanced driving dynamics, a roomier cabin and a more user-friendly design, this fourth generation version deals with many of the drawbacks that used to be part and parcel of Prius ownership. As a result, Toyota has created a model here that's increasingly difficult to ignore in the gloomy times we live in. Drive this car and then analyse it, and you begin to realise why direct competitors are so thin on the ground. It's not because conventional hybrid engineering has had its day. No, it's down to the fact that rivals simply don't possess technology that can match what's on offer here, and nor will they have it for the foreseeable future. So, what do they have? Eco-diesels that smog up the atmosphere with nitrogen oxide, full electric cars that struggle to go more than 100 miles between charges, and range extender battery models that still severely limit you on the distance you can go between fill-ups. Arguably, none of these options are really long-term engineering solutions. Better is plug-in hybrid and hydrogen fuel cell technology, but in both cases, there's quite a high price to pay for it. Anyway, Toyota has market leadership in both those areas too. For the time being, though, we think that the most credible option for the eco-conscious motorist could well be found right here. The Prius is not a car for the driving enthusiast, and it never will be. But if you can accept that, get on with the way it looks, and adjust to the frugally focused manner in which it'll want you to drive, then we think you'll like mostly everything else about it, which is not something that we would have said about this model's predecessors. A Prius for the people, then? Well, that is about the size of it. Toyota's hybrid revolution continues to gather pace.